Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Outwired. I am Brian Searle with Insider Perks here with my esteemed colleague, Scott Barr from Kieran Consulting Group. We're missing Greg Emmert today. He apparently had some kind of family commitment with his wife that was more important than our show, which I feel like we'll just have to have discussions with him about that, Scott.
Yeah, that's I
Uh,
don't know. Where he's coming
priorities,
from.
right? Like priorities. But we got a really interesting discussion for you today. In lieu of that, we're going to talk a lot about campers and how they are feeling, about different aspects of the inflation, the economy, how they're going to react, what they might think, what they might do. We're going to do some live research with some deep research tools with AI here on Grok and Perplexity and ChatGPT, and then we're going to talk about it. We're going to obviously hear Scott's insights into this, some anecdotal evidence he has, some data he's run, all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to get there. But before we do, I think we want to start with the things that came across our desk. So can I go first this time?
Please do.
All right. So came across my desk is robot related this week, right? So I was watching I can't remember, I think his name is Peter Diamidis. I'm going to butcher his last name. But he's the founder of like Moonshots podcast. He's a really big investor. Knows Elon really well and a bunch of the other people that are big into AI and tech. And I was watching him interview the founder of Figure Robotics, which you missed this episode where we talked about robots, and you should go back because you'll get scared of it, Scott, if you watch how advanced the robots are. When you missed that episode, that's what Greg and I did. And he was talking about up on stage. He's like, we already have these robots in BMW plants that are like manufacturing cars. And we already have a second unnamed Fortune 500 company that we're working with on prototyping. But he said that we have talked to probably, and I can't remember the number, but a large portion of the Fortune 30 companies, I think he said, 30 companies that are all part of the Fortune 100, who we have great relationships with. And we feel like if we could produce these, we could sell 1 million of these in the next 30 days, if we could actually make them. And this is already like here, right? And so if you extrapolate that out, this is kind of what worries me about robotics. Not worries me, but worries me and excites me. We're not going to spend too much time on this, right? But if you look at like a BMW plant, just using his example, not saying BMW is going to do this because I don't know. But if you look at like the only barrier here, like it's done. The robots are built. They're coming out with something called Figure 3. This robotics company is they're supposed to announce it in the next few weeks, I think, although there's no firm date on it. And that's going to be the one they're going to mass produce. There's a video on YouTube called BotQ that you can look up that shows a peek into them, like a mass production humanoid robot factory. They're going to start making these this year. But that's literally the only barrier to this. So if they can scale up that production and they can get to 1 million a month, which probably is going to be 2 years realistically. This year, I think they've stated they want to make between 10 and 20,000, and next year 100,000. So this is moving still fast. It's just not 1 million a month, right? But at that point, like if you're able to sell 1 million of those in 30 days, think about what that replaces for a BMW. That doesn't just replace 1 million workers. But I think, and you can tell me with data, Scott, like I think that replaces 4 to 5 million workers.
Correct. Yes.
Because you're talking about morning shift and afternoon shift and evening shift and coverage for sick days and weekends with a robot that can work 24.
You're probably talking at a minimum of like 3.5 workers at a bare minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just want to keep driving this home little by little that like this is for sure happening faster than anybody thinks. You need to research this. You need to pay attention to it. You're going to have robots if you want to. Like you're going to have robots cleaning your cabins in less than 3 years and mowing your lawn and cleaning your bathrooms for like 70 cents an hour. So like that was what came across my desk. It was interesting. What did you see, Scott?
Well, this week I was in Michigan for the Camp Michigan conference.
Yeah.
And it's to me, it's always one of my favorite parts of the work that I do is being able to meet with people who are out there, managing the parks and doing these things. So that just in and of itself to me is a big part, and is very I get very excited about it. But in the conversation, during the presentation,
which you said was well intended, right?
Yeah, yeah, I thought so. Um, I mean, my session had a pretty full room, so it was, and beyond that, it was a very engaged group, asking lots of really good questions, really
I don't want to
into
interrupt you, but I just realized we could do product placement. We just have the label face the camera.
we
Sorry, go ahead.
probably should. Where's
Yeah.
Bookers? Bring them on board
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
because we actually need product too. So,
That's
um,
true.
yeah, go to bookers.com, type in Outwired in the promotion code. Um, the was the idea and I just enjoyed this part of the conversation a lot, was um, talking actually about glamping. And spontaneously, one of the campground owners goes, well, what is glamping? Do we even know? And and my response was, it depends on who you ask. I was like, you can go out there and type in what's the definition of glamping. You'll get a bunch of different ones, and they may or may not make sense to you. So, and not to get into the weeds on what glamping is and what the definition is,
Yeah.
to me, the best part of it was the conversation we had. I had an hour presentation, and we probably spent 15 minutes talking about this. And one, it shows you the interest and engagement, but it was just, from my point of view, being able to talk to people like that, to have that interactive conversation, and to hear where they're at, how they're seeing things, because they're basing it on what they see at their parks, And so, to me, it was like I didn't get to the last couple slides of my presentation because of that. And I don't think anyone missed it at all because it was
No, that's a
about
good problem to have.
extended stays, and I feel like at that point I was extending my stay anyway. But it was good. It was good. We also had a really good conversation about AI because several of the people in the room didn't think it was necessary. So what I actually did is I showed them one of the things that you always do, Brian, which was before I got there and for my presentation, I typed in a prompt for a trip to an area in Michigan and said, give me my itinerary and where I should be staying. Here's my family dynamics and such. And it was very impactful for them to see what the output was, the day by day itinerary it gave me, but more importantly, what RV parks showed up.
Yeah.
Because I said I was staying in an RV, and and I said, like what you always say, if your name doesn't pop up and you're in this area, you might want to think about what you're doing and kind of get on board. So even though I don't know AI real well, I do use it and I know enough about it. But I felt like I changed some minds, in the room, that some people, there were some heads nodding by the time we got through with the conversation about the use of it. And, so anyway, that to me, it was rewarding. It was interesting and well worth the time.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it was well attended. Yeah, I've never been to Michigan show, but it's on my list sometime. It's so expensive to get anywhere now that I'm up here in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And then, time and all that stuff. But all right, so let's go. I didn't have a chance to chop this down, so you're just gonna have to watch this again, Scott. But let's play our data talk intro and get to data talk.
All right, sounds good.
Breaking news. Numbers exist, and some people have too many opinions about them.
Look at that nerd with a pie chart in hand, analyzing trends like he runs the land. He says Q4's looking strong with a 2% bump, but nobody cares, dude. Just go to brunch, data talk, stat, here's a 90-page deck on why sales went flat. Graph, chart, let me tell you about the trends in artisanal Pop-Tarts. They got Excel sheets with 500 tabs, talking standard deviations like it's casual chat. Regression analysis proves I'm right. Cool, but when's the last time you slept at night? Data talk, click, let's deep dive why millennials aren't buying bricks. Trend, plot, welcome to Data Talk. Prepare to get lost.
Tonight on Data Talk, why people who say synergy should not be allowed in society.
Welcome to Data Talk. Prepare to get lost.
I'm excited to see where that's going to go in like 3 months. What we're going to like, what kind of video content we're going to be able to create. For those of you who never saw that last week, didn't tune in, that's entirely made with AI. We prompted that using OpenAI, Sora, and some video models. So it's always interesting to see. Just have a little fun, right? Eventually, we'll cut that down, and then maybe we'll retire it like Bird Talk. I don't know. We'll see. We got to eventually do like something for me, right, to make fun of me.
Absolutely. I have ideas.
You've got to make it. Like I can't make my own video.
Correct.
All right, so we'll have to have some training courses on that.
Well, yes,
Okay.
we will.
All right, so one thing before we get to your, so I think on our list we have our nerd word that we want to start with that is new because we used to do like the bird of the week, and then we got Greg to admit last week, I think it was, that no one cares about birds except for him. Or no, this probably phrased a little bit better than that because I like birds in my backyard too. I just don't need to look at them with binoculars all the time. But so we created a nerd word, and you don't even know that this is a thing yet, right? So I told you like briefly what the goal of this was. So our nerd word of the week is campendicity. You pronounce that campendicity.
Okay.
And that refers to the highly specialized metric used to quantify and analyze comfort inflation, in quotes, in campgrounds and glamping sites. It measures the ratio between a campsite's rustic authenticity, e.g., tent-only plots and wood fire cooking, and its modern conveniences like hot tubs, espresso machines, and Wi-Fi speeds. Data scientists apply campendicity to model how the introduction of luxury amenities affects overall satisfaction, nightly rates, and marshmallow roasting frequency. I mean, I think this is legit. Like I was telling you before the show, like I think we could actually create our own custom terms based off this. And then ChatGPT gave me like an etymology, which I feel like is not too important. Well, maybe it's interesting. Let's just read this for a second. So this roots, it's from campus, Latin for open field, fused with an obscure Middle Greek verb pendian, meaning to balance or weigh disparate elements. That's interesting. And a historical note, it was first documented in the late 1970s by Dr. Bernice T. Mugwump at the Redwood Data Conglomerate. She noticed an uptick in demand for rugged yet pampered outdoor experiences and devised this precise measure to track how quickly a simple campsite can transform into a luxury micro resort. Like we're making fun of this. This is a made up word, obviously, but this actually is legit. We could do this, Scott.
Absolutely. And we can, I say we gather the data and actually calculate it.
The campendicity score. Yeah. So it says researchers
and score.
Researchers and campground analysts often track campendicity across seasons to spot trends in gourmet s'mores inflation, or the so-called GSI index, and identify the tipping point where campers begin labeling a site glamping, like you were talking about, rather than roughing it. By correlating campendicity scores with visitor satisfaction surveys, data professionals can predict which amenities, heated massage chairs versus artisanal composting toilets, actually boost bookings. This is cool. Like, this is actually cool. This is not as crazy as the made-up bird stuff we were doing before. And fun fact, campendicity also spawned the popular coefficient of marshmallow overload, an offshoot statistic that calculates the peak ratio of sugary treats per campfire, at which group sing-alongs devolve into sticky chaos. So there you go. That's our word of the week, campendicity. You'll probably see that showing up in some reports eventually.
It's going to happen.
Where do we want to start? Like, I think we want to. Did we decide we want to start with meth labs? Is that where we want to take this?
I think we'll get to that later in the show once people are, when we need to wake them up a little bit. So
okay, so wake them up with data first and statistics, and then we'll go to meth labs. Or
sure, yeah, let's do that.
All right. So stay tuned if you want to learn more about meth labs and how they relate to repeat visitation at your campground. Okay, so where do you want to start, Scott? Talk about, let's talk about the method, the reason that you wanted to do this show first.
This show this week?
The topic that you proposed, right?
Yeah, that is to get into the topic of where people's heads are at, the guests. to really, you know, think about, research where people are at this point, because it feels like the year started off one way, and it feels like things have changed, and feels whatever. But what we're hearing is that there may be some trepidation out there, some hesitance in terms of booking right now, where early on in the year and entering into the season, it seemed like it was a little bit more optimistic. So really what we want to do is look, it's like, is this real? Is it something we should think about? And if we do think about it, what should we do about it? Based on what's actually happening out there. So yeah, it's kind of where we're in the middle, nearing the end of March. It's almost spring, and people are starting to think about camping.
Oh, it is, isn't it? It's 2 days until spring. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So it's like, this is a time of year when people really start to think about these things. And, we're on the cusp of spring break. There's a lot of spring breaking going on. It'll be interesting to track that, see how many people get out and about over spring break. That may be a bellwether for the rest of the year. So anyway, yeah, the whole idea was, where are people at? Where are their heads at right now? What's impacting their attitudes and behaviors right now?
And so obviously, like, I think we should preface this by saying, like, we're going to do some really cool research. We're going to look at some AI tools, Perplexity, Grok, that are going to go out and search the internet in real time, search comments on X in real time, try to bring back some of that sentiment and kind of forecasting and intuition based on, like, this is what it probably means based on logic, right? We haven't obviously had a chance to go out and survey 2,000 people and call them on the phone and ask them how this stuff works. But from our history and what we've looked at, Scott, in the past, the data that typically is output by at least ChatGPT's O1 Pro mode, and then that doesn't even have access to the real-time internet, is about 90 to 95% accurate, is what we found, right?
Yep.
And so I think the data that we're going to get from here, and we'll run kind of like one prompt, and we'll do the deep research, and we'll look at the results, and then we're kind of going to discuss it, mostly from Scott's expertise, but just from my intuition, working with a couple hundred campgrounds and having weekly calls with a lot of these people, and just kind of what we're seeing. So where do you want to start, Scott? Like, do you want to, like, I have that doc I gave you. You had your questions. Like, where do you think you want to start?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say, to kind of set the table, is that one of the things we know from previous research is that whenever there's an economic situation, or maybe national events, national stress, that kind of thing, especially the economy, in a down economy, threats of recession, all that, that around 70% of the people change their habits in some way.
Okay.
That only about 30% of the people say that they're not going to change their habits. So the bulk of people, if we enter into a tough economic time, you can count on 70% of the people changing their habits. And based on how the severity, where it impacts all those things, it can help you or it can hurt you, but it's going to change.
Is there a sense of who the 30% is? Are they always consistent? Like, are they always like an older demographic, for example? Or
yes, it's typically older, higher income folks are much less likely to be impacted.
So people with likely more stability.
Yeah, the RVers too, by the way, which kind of fit into that category.
For sure.
They're a fairly stable group overall. Some might disagree.
The baby boomers, like the older RVers who are retired and have a fixed income and have planned ahead and budgeted, and right.
They're still going to go out and they're still going to do these things. But yeah, it's usually the younger people, lower income families, and so on, that are a little bit more impacted by this stuff. So,
all right. Well, where do you want to start?
Well, did we mention inflation? Was that the first topic we were going to start?
Well, the document, like, I ran that in the prompt to have it ready for the personas, but like I have travel radius, trip duration, like, well, inflation anxiety.
Let's do travel radius and trip duration. I like that one because that's something people can get their heads around real easily. and hopefully we can talk intelligently about too.
All right. So, and do we want to try to limit this? Like the data's not going to be there. We know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like Bloomberg is not conducting this, right?
Right.
These studies. So do we want to limit it to travelers, or do we want to try to go after? I think we want to go after campers, right?
If we can get campers, we should do that.
So the mindset of that. I mean, I don't know that we can, but I'm pretty sure it can make an intelligent extrapolation based on its knowledge in the LLM, the chat, the model, whatever, right? To be
Right.
less
By the
geeky.
way, just to give some context to people, the non-camping leisure traveler is much more impacted by the economy. They are much more likely to cancel plans. So while a camper may adjust, for example, they may, like we're going to talk about, stay closer to home. The leisure traveler is much more likely to cancel. A camper is more, will spend less on, food and entertainment. Leisure traveler will cancel. So just to keep that in mind, that campers are a little bit more flexible in their plans.
Okay, which means generally speaking, the data that we get back extrapolated out should be better than what we can expect from the remainder of the economy?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right, Lisa, you're going to have to go to my screen here. We're going to show this kind of in real time. What we're going to do is we're going to take a mini prompt like this. And so this one, that will be different, but this one's travel radius. It's just, I don't know if that's big enough, if I can make it bigger or not, but are people venturing further from home post-pandemic / in an inflationary environment? I think we can probably just take off the post-pandemic. From home in an inflationary environment or sticking closer to local spots. Any notable shifts from past years in average trip distance? Focus on 2025 recent data. We are specifically looking at people who go camping at a private campground, RV park, RV resort, or glamping resort. So we're going to take this and we're going to put this into Grok, which is going to go out and search the internet in real time as well as X, and it's kind of a deep research thing. You'll kind of start to see this go here in a second. And then you can see like we get our sources down here at the bottom. So it's browsed 10 so far, and it will keep going. And then we're also going to take it over into Perplexity, which is an AI search engine. 2, we're going to use the exact same thing, and we're going to go to their deep research tool. And then again, it's going to go out, and it's going to reason through this stuff and browse a bunch of sources for us. So we can just kind of compare the results there and see what's happening. So we'll see which one finishes first here. You can see like here on the screen, I don't know how big that is, but it's referencing like the DIRT's 2025 camping report and their 2024 one, and a couple studies from PR Newswire and outdoors.com. And so then we'll just let this thing finish here, and then we'll see what we get from both of these, and we'll discuss. Look, it's referencing Modern Campground. Hopefully we're accurate.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know what specifically, but we'll find out. So you can see at the bottom here, we were up to 39 web pages. So this is just, these tools are generally just powerful for you to research your own stuff, right? You don't have to go browse and click and browse and click and browse and click. 49 web pages we're up to. Let's check in on this one over here. This one's got 15. And so you can always click on these. I think at the end you can click on these, but you can always click on the sources and see where it got its data. All right, so here we go from Grok, 52 web pages. Key points. Research suggests camping trip distances in 2025 are likely similar to 2023, averaging around 179 miles with no notable shifts reported. That's interesting. It seems that likely that lower gas prices in 2025 may encourage some to travel further, but evidence is inconclusive without specific data. The evidence leans toward campers sticking to similar distances despite inflation, as camping remains popular and budget-friendly. So that's that one. I know you disagree with that, and I think I kind of do too, Scott, which is the benefit of us having that commentary, right? And then it goes into some details we can look at. But it's looking at a lot of reports of data that is not necessarily wrong, but is already old because of how fast things are changing, right?
Correct.
I think it's the main thing. So let's see what Perplexity says, and then we can kind of see uh, whether we get agreements here or whatever else. All right, so inflation's impact. Okay, according to recent data, camping enthusiasts are demonstrating a fascinating mix of adaptability and resilience in response to inflation, with distinct patterns emerging in how far they're willing to travel. The nearcation phenomenon versus distance adaptation. That's interesting. The camping industry is witnessing a notable dichotomy. Is that how you pronounce that?
Dichotomy.
Dichotomy. Okay. Learn something new every day. See? In travel behaviors, with economic pressures creating two distinct responses from campers seeking outdoor experiences. A significant trend continues to be the nearcation phenomenon. The pattern, which began emerging during previous periods of high gas prices, appears to be persisting. During peak travel periods, many private campgrounds report that over half their guests are locals, with much of the remaining percentage traveling from within a 150-mile radius. What did it say here? Did it say 149 here? It said 179 miles from Grok. Okay. With much of the remaining percentage. Okay, the 2025 camping report by the Dirt indicates that while inflation concerns persist, campers are adapting their travel behaviors rather than abandoning trips altogether. RV industry consultant Sandy Ellingson, look at that. She was on our show earlier today. She'll probably be super proud that she appeared in that. I wonder where that's sourced from. I'm fascinated by that. Notes that many RVers are specifically choosing shorter distance trips due to fuel costs, but are extending their stays. That was from Modern Campground. Camping industry remains strong amid high gas prices and inflation. So we must have quoted her in that. Distance adaptation strategies. The boondocking solution. Inflation at the beginning of the season threatened our travel plans, said one camper from Ohio. We wanted to visit the western United States, but camping costs were a challenge, so we tried boondocking, no reservations, no fees, and we loved it. That was from Caribbean News Digital. Interesting. 2025 camping report by the Dirt. It looks like it pulled from. It was just from that website. So anyway, rise of spontaneous travel. Same-day bookings grew 33% year over year in 2024, suggesting an increase in spontaneous, potentially shorter distance trips, which would lend itself to the shorter booking window too, right? Because obviously you're not driving cross country in a shorter booking window. It says mobile booking platforms are driving this change, with over 500,000 campers expected to book trips via their phones in 2025. International ambitions persist. Glamping is a budget-conscious alternative. RV travel equation, et cetera, et cetera. What's this? A survey by RV Share found that only 2% of travelers are likely to cancel vacation plans due to inflation, with 88% of Americans planning to travel as much or as more in 2023. So that's an old study. Right. So
that was done at a peak, during peak COVID years. So people were still, it wasn't peak COVID years, I shouldn't say that, but it was still, we're still kind of in that phase where people were still like, yeah, I'm going to still camp a lot. And then 2023 showed that they didn't.
All right. Well, let's go back to, you can take this off for a second, Lisa. Discuss, Scott. What do you think?
I think in general, what you're going to see is people are going to stay closer to home. I think unless something flipped really fast and changed the economy very fast, there's all these factors going into it. But I guess as the phrase they use, the nearcation, that's good. I feel like that's going to happen. I feel like that's going to be real. Excuse me. People tend to want to stay closer to home when they feel stressed and economic anxiety.
Why is that? Like, because you talk, and I think I already know the answer to this. But it's interesting to explore the psychology behind that, because I think, like, for me, I would rather get, it's almost like and I hate to use it, such a terrible example, but it's almost like somebody you love died in your house and you have to be in the same house that you shared so many memories with them, right? Do you want to escape the place and source of the stress? So you would think that maybe you might travel further in some cases. Or is that not, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but does that impact anything?
The overriding factor there is familiarity. Familiarity is comfortable. And even if you're in an environment that may be associated with some stress, it's still familiar. And it's the devil phenomenon. versus venturing out. And then if you think about the complexity that's involved with, say, a family of 4 or 5 hitting the road and taking a vacation for 2 weeks, traveling 2,000 miles, and just that alone stresses a lot of people out. Just the idea of it.
That's true, because it is hard to trip plan and all that. And I'm just looking up some market research here while you talk. I'm listening to you. Um, that's true. It's outside of your comfort zone. Like I forget sometimes that like that's interesting to me because I like being outside my comfort zone.
Hmm. Yeah. So that's why we saw a couple years ago, and for some people, even like during COVID, the idea of the staycation, where they actually stayed at home, was very appealing to a certain group of people, and it still is. So, yeah, the staying close to home, it's general. It's a general theme, but people do want to spend their money closer to home. They want to stay closer to home. They want to know that it's there. Getting too far out, and I mean, let's face it. There's been, air travel's been a little bit weird. So people, traveling long distances, not knowing what's going to happen from day to day, but knowing that there's, someone, and you may even know, like the campground owners, and knowing what's there and knowing what to expect. There's comfort in that.
I think this is something that we've heard before in previous, like 2008, 2009, previous recessions, right?
Yep.
That people stay. So there is a lot of evidence that this is the case. I think where perhaps some of us are undecided yet is whether we're actually in another recession or heading toward a recession, or everything's just going to be perfect and fine. Or I think there's a lot of debate about that still, which there was before the 2008 recession, right? For like a year and a half, people were talking about it. Everybody remembers it as a crash, and it was, but like we were talking about the crash for a year and a half before it happened. Not obviously not us, but right. So, yeah, I think that's, and so then how do you prepare for that as a park owner? I think is the next question, right?
Yeah, and I mean, my initial reaction is, market locally, find those folks, and use those comforting messages that we're here, we're just around the corner, come have a great escape with us, we're right here, we're close by. And I think there's a lot that a creative marketing person could do with that messaging.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the audience, right? And so for me, like we're already talking about clients about shifting this in certain cases, right? Every resort is different, every location is different, as you were talking about last week, like macro versus micro data, all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, like if you want to shift your targeting to locals in this aspect, then it's a difference of one, if you're running Google Ads campaigns, change the targeting. If you're running Facebook ads campaigns, change the targeting. But don't just change the targeting, change the verbiage of that. Because now you're talking to people who no longer are traveling across the country. So maybe their focus isn't on the same type of amenities as a long distance traveler would want, right?
Mhm.
Maybe they don't want to hear the same words or the same tone of voice or the same things highlighted or whatever that may be. But also, like, I think it depends on if you're trying to go after people who have RVs, which is not hard, but harder if you're just dealing with like a local versus national pocket, right? I mean, many
Mhm.
parks are rural. They're not outside. Well, some of them are outside major cities. Um, but it becomes a question of like, let me find, if I don't have a Dallas or a San Antonio or an Orlando or whatever to target, uh, that pool of potential people who owns RVs in a smaller city is, well, smaller, uh, you know, but then how do I reach beyond just the RVers to the people who might be, we talked about this on Fireside Chats earlier, right? How do I create a passion for the outdoors in the people who otherwise don't own an RV yet, aren't likely to own an RV maybe yet or never. But how do I reach the people who maybe I can set up a luxury tent for and have all that stuff ready so they can come experience the outdoors and kind of use that as a gateway? how do I recruit people into my cabin rentals or glamping or my RV rentals, which is a much easier sell. And so that messaging is different for each of those types of people, right?
It is. It generally is. But the one common factor is the ability to kind of have an escape, a little bit of escapism, as well as kind of disconnect, slow down. Those themes cross all lines. Especially when people are stressed out a little bit, they want to relax, and that to me is that's a common thread that you can use with any of those segments that you just talked about.
I just lost my whiskey. Sorry, it was down here.
Okay, sorry, but we don't want any tragedies here.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
and the accommodations they stay in, you'll find the appeal of that, for whatever segment you're targeting. It's like, but the ease and the comfort, come here, we're gonna have things set up for you. We're gonna make this as low stress and low key as we can possibly make it for you. To me that is very appealing for folks who, again, are stressed out and they're close by and they want some convenience. They want convenience and comfort, and both physical and emotional. So that's that opportunity. Again,
well, let's find out here. Like Lisa, you want to share the screen again? So we ran this. I took a prompt, and we'll do this for a couple of these, right? I took a prompt in here and I said, create me 10 types of buyer personas who would typically stay at RV parks, campgrounds, whatever else, private RV parks, that are concerned about inflation, and then ask them a series of 5 questions related to inflation. But I said that one of those questions needs to be like, how do I want to be marketed to either reinforce my decision to come or to change my mind about not coming. And then in this case, specifically, one of the questions is, how far am I willing to travel from home in such an environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the 10 people we got back are, and I'm not going to read all these, but the young family adventurer, couple in their early 30s with 2 small children, budget-conscious retiree, individuals on a fixed income but loves the sense of freedom that RV travel brings, a solo wanderlust traveler, person is single and craves solitude and outdoor adventure, a luxury glamping couple, a professional successful couple in their 40s that enjoy upscale amenities and unique outdoor experiences. And I'm just reading these for the podcast people. The remote working explorer, a digital nomad that works from anywhere and appreciates reliable Wi-Fi, scenic views, and the flexibility to stay longer if they wish. The eco-friendly enthusiast prioritizes sustainable facilities and activities that lessen environmental impact. The large group coordinator is someone planning a getaway for a big group of friends or multiple families. The weekend warrior employed full-time, they can only escape on short bursts. The pet-friendly camper travels with a beloved pet. They seek locations that are safe and welcoming for furry companions. And the festival goer or RV enthusiast, they love combining RV travel with special events, festivals, or outdoor concerts. That's a pretty good mix, I'd say, of people without being more specific. So then we asked them 5 questions. These are the same 5 questions from each one. And again, this is the 90 to 95% accurate stuff. We've looked at this quite a bit, Scott and I have, for different things. So the first question was, how has the current inflation environment affected your overall travel or vacation budget for this year? And I don't know if we're going to read all of these, right? But just a couple samples. We'll pick a couple. Who do we want to read that question for? Like, of the 10 personas, Scott, who do you want to hear that answer from?
I'd like to I'd like to hear the young family.
All right, so the young family says, we have to be more careful with every purchase and look for deals or discounts on campground fees. Our overall budget is tighter, so we might skip some optional extras to keep the trip affordable. Anybody else you want to hear an answer to that question from? I feel like just comparing the responses may be helpful. Well, you know what? What we can do is we can just do this, because at the end, I took all these wrap-up people and I combined them into one main response of, like, basically I said, all of you people collaborate together, and this didn't answer it actually correctly, but this is probably suitable for our short time period here. Normally I want it to break it down, the answer per question. But it says we're all keeping a closer eye on our budgets this year, whether that means shorter trips, fewer add-ons, or prioritizing affordability and value. when choosing between private campgrounds, RV parks, or glamping sites. Inflation is making us more cautious, but we still crave the outdoors for relaxation, adventure, and time with family, friends, or even solo. To sway us, we want clear, transparent information on pricing, deals, and relevant amenities, whether that's family friendly packages, senior discounts, eco initiatives, pet accommodations, or work friendly setups. So we can feel confident in our decision. We want to hear reassuring messaging that speaks directly to our specific needs and shows we're getting good value in spite of rising costs. Most of us are leaning toward destinations closer to home to save on fuel and travel expenses, though we might still venture further out for truly compelling experiences or special occasions. So I think the way we should work this is like, let's review some of these more just in this first one because it's just the first one about inflation. And then we can probably just cut it down to the marketing messaging in this specific question in the future. Is that fair?
Yep.
All right. So let's just go through a couple of these. We'll just stay with the young family adventure. The second question was, how does inflation influence your decision when it comes to selecting between a private campground or glamping resort? I don't need to read that whole question. We lean toward private campgrounds that offer family-focused amenities at a lower cost rather than pricier glamping resorts. We only upgrade to something more premium if we find a compelling package or off-season deal. That makes sense to me. And just stop, like you can say like, hey, no, that doesn't make sense, or like I want to have an anecdotal evidence of that, or like we want to hear your take too, Scott. You have such a wealth of data. The third question was, are you adjusting your usual length of stay or frequency of camping trips due to rising costs? Yes, we might shorten our trips by a day or two to save on accommodations and food costs. We're also considering fewer trips overall, but we want to keep at least one memorable family getaway. I think we saw this in 2024, didn't we?
Yes, we did. And this is something that we're really keeping an eye on because it feels like this is that one of those adjustments. Remember, earlier I said, 70+% of the people make an adjustment. This is one. We don't like it as an adjustment, but it is typically one of the first adjustments.
Yeah, because you can still go on a trip, period.
Right. They still want a vacation, but you have to do something to adjust.
All right. So number 4 is, what kind of messaging or boy, I can't talk, can I? Reassurance do you want to hear from these destinations or brands that would convince you to still visit or confirm your decision still to come? We would love to see messaging focused on family-friendly deals, kids stay free promos, or inclusive activity packages. How many people, let me read the answer and then I'll ask that question. Hearing about budget-friendly packages and kid-oriented activities makes us feel we can still have fun without breaking the bank. How many people still charge for kids? Is that really still a thing?
I think in some areas it is.
I mean, I remember having this discussion with people 8-9 years ago. Like, of course you don't charge for kids. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I understand there's more people using our amenities and all that kind of stuff, but it's just like and I guess there's two sides to the coin, to be clear. I think there's a lot of, do you charge the resort fee either? And I think the general consensus that I've heard and how I feel is like, fold it into your rate, because the add-on fee at the end is a surprise fee. And that's one of the biggest reasons people don't complete checkouts in general with e-commerce, is surprise fees. So I feel like this is the same way. Like, I think kids stay free promos is good, but like, it has to be new, right? Like, if you already have kids stay free, then
it implies that you weren't doing it before.
Yeah.
It set a bad tone in the mind of the guest. So yeah, I wouldn't go with that one.
But still, good advice overall. For that person anyway. I mean, again, that's the young family adventurer and their thing, right? So like, it depends. I think most of the consumers, and especially if you're going outside of your zone of just people who RV, I think most of the consumers have been used to, for a number of years, like not being charged for their kids in hotels, right? So
correct. So
are you venturing further out from home in an inflationary environment, or sticking closer to local spots? We're more inclined to stay closer to home to minimize travel expenses. However, we might do one special trip a bit farther if the overall value is worth it. So that goes to the experience of like making your place special and marketing it as such, right?
Yep.
If you want to continue to get those. We don't want to read all of these, but is there a couple other ones you want to hear from? Like that we have a budget conscious retiree, solo wanderlust traveler, a luxury glamping couple, remote working.
I like the remote working person.
Okay, so remote working. The questions should all be the same. So, how has the current inflation environment affected your overall travel or vacation budget for this year? I have to balance everyday living costs with campground fees, so inflation definitely pinches. I'm recalculating monthly expenses to see how many travel days I can afford. Two is, how does inflation influence your decision when it comes to selecting between a private campground, an RV park, blah, 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 blah. I look for places with good Wi-Fi and a comfortable work-friendly environment. If prices go up, I might stick to more affordable RV parks or campgrounds long-term rather than hopping around glamping resorts. Three is, are you adjusting your usual length of stay or frequency of camping trips due to rising costs? Yes, I might choose longer stays in single locations to reduce travel expenses and negotiate better weekly or monthly rates. It's easier to budget when I have a set cost for a longer period. Four is, what kind of messaging or reassurance do you want to hear from these destinations or brands that would convince you to still visit or confirm your decision to come? Clear information about reliable internet, comfortable work setups, and long stay discounts. I want to feel confident that I can maintain my work routine without hidden costs popping up. And number five is, are you venturing further from home in an inflationary environment or sticking closer to local spots? I'm willing to venture anywhere as long as it makes sense financially and logistically for remote work. But if costs spike, I'll seek out closer, more cost-effective locations. And that's interesting too, because like there's the person who's, let's pretend, just make up something and say they live in Detroit, Michigan, right? There's the person who has that place in Detroit, Michigan, but is also an RVer who would go remote work and hop, right? But then there's the person who's already nomadic full time and maybe doesn't have a residence except for their RV. And then that person, where they stay closer, they may just like, it might be closer to wherever they're at the point in time where they realize they can't keep spending the way they are, right?
Right.
So maybe they stick closer to San Antonio, Texas, because that's where they are when they realize that, right? And then they become a local there, but it's still a local.
Correct. And one of the things that came up in that last response too is, if costs spike, that is one of the more nebulous things that we have to consider in all of this, which is, what is a spike? What is the spike in the mind of the traveler, of that person?
I think
How
it's
much does that
25%
have to go up?
would be a spike.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would argue with that.
Yeah, it's like, what is that? If it goes up really slow, it's like the old frog in the pot of water thing. If you turn it up slow, is it less? But if it goes up, 20 cents all at once, like gas or something, is that enough? And we don't know that right now, honestly. It's one of those areas of analysis that we need to get into, and to make ourselves a little bit more valuable to folks in making decisions. But what is that? What is that tipping point?
Well, we can ask
I
that
personally
question.
feel that sometimes it isn't. And we did this in the research the monthly research we were doing with KOA a couple of years ago. We actually did this where we were able to tease out the whole idea of overcrowding at the time. Like, is it real, or do they just hear about it? And what we saw was that people who said that they didn't go camping because of overcrowding, was a lot of it had to do with, they had just heard that it was overcrowding, not that they had actually experienced it or seen any statistics on it or even tried to book a campsite. It was because they heard about it. They read on the news. They read in industry articles or something. So that's a long way of saying sometimes it's the chatter that's out there can create a false spike, if you will, on
You mean the
But-
media coverage,
Yes, exactly.
social media more than anything? Well, not more than anything, but there's a whole lot more people with eyes on social media today than there is legacy media companies.
Yep.
So I did ask the question at the bottom. We'll see what that says in a second. Is there anybody else you want to hear from in here before we move on? Like eco-friendly is a little niche, right? The large group might be interesting. Weekend Warrior.
Weekend Warrior. I think the Weekend Warrior. That's a fascinating group, actually.
All right. So Weekend Warrior. Same questions, just repeating them for clarity. So how has the current inflation environment affected your overall travel or vacation budget for this year? I still want to get out as often as possible, but I noticed my weekend trips cost more than before. I'm looking harder for sales or lower priced campgrounds. 2 is, how does inflation influence your decision when it comes to selecting between a private campground? That I keep shortening this, but it says campground, RV park, RV resort, or glamping resort is what the question always says, just to save myself that breath. I often pick private campgrounds or basic RV parks that are nearby to cut down on gas and nightly fees. Glamping resorts might be a special treat once in a blue moon. Are you adjusting your usual length of stay or frequency of camping trips due to rising costs? I try to keep the same frequency, but might do one-night getaways instead of two-night stays sometimes. Keeping the trip short and sweet helps me manage costs. What kind of messaging or reassurance do you want to hear from these destinations or brands that would convince you to still visit or confirm your decision to still come? Show me easy weekend packages with minimal planning needed and fair prices. Deals that cater to quick getaways give me confidence that I can still afford my outdoor fix. That's especially important for locals, right? Because they can get in that quick getaway. Are you venturing further from home in an inflationary environment or sticking closer to local spots? I prefer closer spots so I can spend more time relaxing than driving. If I find a great deal farther away, I might consider it, but time is limited.
Yep, that makes sense. I actually like that.
Yeah, so that's
I think that's very true. That trade-off, people do make do that calculus in their heads. It's like, driving further, maybe the destination's a little bit nicer, but there's someplace closer, and they can spend more time doing what they want to do.
And this is why I think it's so important to talk about the story that you're telling your people, right? And this, like, we're looking at buyer personas specific to inflation right now. You should be looking at buyer personas specific to your individual RV park or campground in your location. You've got to create those, right? And AI can help you with that, but you got to have somebody who knows AI to actually create them. Or you got to watch YouTube or ask AI how to create buyer personas, right? But we're doing this for all of our clients. But it's not just buyer personas; it's buyer personas that are different from your usual audience. And so we're finding this as we run these for our clients. It will go out and research hundreds of different, like the custom AI we built will go out and research hundreds of different websites in real time, and aggregate all this data together, kind of like you saw Grok and Perplexity do, which are also, by the way, good tools that you can use, to save money. But going out and looking at the data that those tools are going to pull from you, just like we looked at the data of 2023 and some of the older reports that are outdated because things are changing so fast, it's going to pull the typical ideal customer, the typical buyer personas for you that it knows historically. And you need to make sure that you're forcing it to recognize that I'm trying to go after a new audience of locals, or a new audience of locals who don't own RVs, and put that into the prompt and make it give you buyer personas that are directly related to that group, and then begin asking them the questions that we're doing. And what you're going to find is, if you ask it the right questions, it's going to give you advice for your different marketing channels. You shouldn't blow up your your homepage of your website necessarily to target all these types of people, because there's 4 to 6 buyer personas is probably a good metric, depending on your location and where you are and who you're targeting, to get a good sample size. But you can't make it cater to everybody on your homepage. So focus on like we talked about at the end here, where I ask, and normally I would have a combined single paragraph for each question, is what I would want this AI to give me. But what kind of copy do I want to see on my website, for example, on the homepage? And then tell that story as a group, but then think about breaking it down on other pages. Think about creating a page for locals that you're then driving local ad traffic to or Facebook ad traffic to that talks in their language about a quick getaway like this, like they want to see, right? The weekend warriors want to see. And then have a different page for the different types of buyer personas. And that seems like a lot of work, and it can be, but if you're having to adjust your targeting, you need to be very careful about the messaging you're giving these people, because the messaging will impact the conversion rate. So I think it's a lot easier to do today on AI. And certainly it's a lot easier to swap the messaging of your Google ads than it is your website. So like depending on who your Google ads are targeting, depending on who your Facebook ads are targeting. But you've got to have this data, and you've got to be talking to the correct people, I think, is an important
Absolutely.
thing.
That it's interesting because I was talking to a couple who own a campground in Michigan when I was there, and their current profile tends to be the older RVer group,
Yeah.
but they've done some changeovers in what they're offering and trying to capitalize on the trends in like people seeking different types of experiences, wellness stuff while they're camping. But and I told them like they're the perfect case study for using a strategy that's going to be AI based, where they bring in that the people who are much more likely to participate in these wellness activities, because they've invested quite a bit in the development of that, and they just need to communicate it, because right now it's not being communicated that well on their website, obviously. And anyway, it's just an interesting case where they want to actively have a changeover in their guest profile. I told them they need to hire Brian Searle to help
No,
them
we
out.
can't self-promote here. That's what the sponsorship by Booker
I
is,
know.
so that we don't have to self-promote.
No, I know, but
do you want to hear the answer to the sixth question?
sure.
The spike in pricing. So this is, you don't have to show this, Lisa, but so the Young Family Venture says a price spike means a sudden jump in nightly rates, extra fees for kids' activities, or a big increase in gas costs that blows up our budget unexpectedly. We need to feel like we can still afford a safe, fun time for our kids without skimping on essentials. The budget-conscious retiree says anything that causes my total trip expense to exceed my monthly discretionary income becomes a deal breaker. Even a small hike in campsite fees or a bump in fuel prices can put the trip out of reach when you're on a fixed retirement budget. The solo wanderlust traveler says a spike is when the per night rate or travel costs jump significantly compared to my typical budget for each adventure. If I suddenly can't stretch my funds to cover food, gear, and extra experiences, I'll have to scale back or pick a different spot. The luxury glamping couple says a spike is when the cost of a premium site or resort package increases beyond the value we'd expect for a luxury experience, say 20 to 30% higher than our usual bookings. If we sense that our comfort and amenities no longer justify the higher cost, we'd find alternatives. The remote working explorer says a spike happens if long stay rates or monthly fees jump by more than what I can balance against my remote work budget. If it disrupts my ability to comfortably handle everyday expenses while on the road, I'll reconsider that destination. Want to keep going, or we have 5 more? You want to keep going, or is that good enough?
I think it's good enough.
Okay. I don't think I was hoping to get percentages, and maybe I just wasn't specific enough with the prompt, but I think that's a good that's a good number, is 20 to 30%.
Yeah, it's
overall, right? Like it could be 5% from gas, and it could be 5% from campground fees, and it could be right.
The collective, the stacking effect, as they say, the cumulative impact of these things. And sometimes it's, things, like I said before, things can maybe go up gradually, but then there's that one spike that kind of pushes things over the edge.
All right, what do we want to do next? So our second thing we have listed on the doc, again, we can skip around here, or we can do something that's not on the doc, is the trip duration and booking windows. Does that interest you, or you want to skip that?
I especially like trip duration, because I entered into this year thinking that trip duration was going to increase, and I think I might have to back off on that a little bit.
All right, so the objective for this, we'll run this through Grok and Perplexity, and then we can decide if we want to do the deep research or not. or the persona of the questions, is investigate how long campers prefer to stay and how far in advance they reserve campsites in 2025. So this is going to be, how do I get a new conversation? In Grok. The key questions are, so we're a little bit more expansive in this one because I had these prepared. Are campers choosing shorter, more frequent micro trips or longer stays? How far in advance are bookings made, last minute versus months ahead? Does seasonality, economic anxiety, or demographic profile affect booking windows? Are there changes from pre-2025 data that indicate new trends? And how campgrounds optimize marketing and dynamic pricing for these shifting patterns? Expected deliverables are relevant statistics or graphs showing average booking lead times, breakdown by type of camping, RV tent or glamping, and actionable tips for operators to capitalize on shorter or longer booking windows. That seem pretty good?
Yep.
All right, so we're going to run this through Grok 3, and then I will do it at the same time in Perplexity. And then we will see what we get. What do you think we're going to get, Scott? Because remember, it's going to be based on our older data, right? It's so hard because this is changing so rapidly, and it's not just what Trump is doing. That's a piece of it, and we're not here politically to say we agree or disagree with that, right?
Correct.
But he's making rapid changes. It's also, what I think is the changes in AI and automation that are impacting the economy. It's also, what else is it, Scott?
It's the attention paid to these issues, even if people aren't personally feeling it, like in their bank accounts or anything like that. They're hearing about it, they're reading about it. So it's that noise, the noise factor that's out there.
And it goes in the back of their head.
Yep. So that, I think that's where we're at. My take on it is that I feel like we're going to see more of those weekend warriors, because for all the reasons that were pointed out in that description. And I think you're going to see people pull back on the big trips this year. Again, I had initially thought that those would increase. But the national park issue, I think, is going to have an impact on that as much as anything, as much as the economy or anything else.
What does that do? Like, are we basically saying then, if that happens, are we basically saying the campgrounds on the way to somewhere are fucked?
No, I don't think they are. I think people are still going to go out, but
if they don't pivot to a different type of audience.
Correct. They may to pivot away from that person who's going to stay, at Glacier or Yellowstone or Yosemite. That's going to be a different type of guest who's it might be a road tripper. It could be a lot more overnighters.
Or it could be picking the locals again, right? Like finding the closest major, not even a major, but closest populated center, 1, 2, 3 of them, and saying, like, look, I'm here. You never thought of me before.
And it may even be somewhat of an opportunity to bring some of those folks in who wouldn't have stayed in the past because it was all out of town people who were there on their vacations, their long trips.
And they didn't want to mix with those people, right?
I don't like to.
Okay, that makes sense. We're still running here. All right, let's see. We have Lisa, you want to share the screen? We'll look at this data. It's finishing up on Perplexity. It's doing a lot of reasoning through all the sources. How many sources to look at? 23 sources on Perplexity. It's crazy how fast it thinks, though, right? How long would it take us to analyze this data?
No, way too long.
See, I said Perplexity was on. Okay, there we go. Jeez. All right. Camping reservation trends in 2025, booking windows and stay duration analysis. The outdoor hospitality industry continues to evolve. The dual nature of booking windows. Today's camping landscape reveals a fascinating, how do I pronounce that again? Dichotomy?
Dichotomy, yep.
Dichotomy. How many times do you think it'll take me to learn that?
3.
Dichotomy. All right.
You got it.
If you're right. And how travelers approach reservations. While many plan meticulously months in advance, others embrace spontaneity through last-minute bookings. The polarization represents a significant shift in consumer behavior that demands attention from industry operators. Long-term advance bookings remain essential. Agree, right?
Yep.
Despite technological innovations enabling faster booking processes, securing campsites at popular destinations still requires substantial advanced planning. National parks require booking 6 months in advance on recreation.gov, with coveted spots filling up within moments of availability. Parks Canada opened 2025 summer season reservations in January and February, considerably earlier than in previous years. BC Parks implemented a 4-month advance booking window. I wonder if it did more Canada because I'm in Canada. But same kind of extrapolated thing. So that's, and then some parks like Yellowstone offer reservations up to 13 months in advance. Booking difficulty remains a persistent challenge after temporarily declining to 45.5% in 2023. The percentage of campers reporting difficulty finding available campsites rebounded to 56.1% in 2024. The scarcity drives the need for advanced planning, particularly for family trips and popular weekends. You know what? I think that's maybe national parks, but it's interesting. I wonder how that scarcity metric relates to like what they're actually looking for. Because what we heard was that scarcity was not as scarce. Is that a thing in 2024? But I wonder if that's like of all the parks that look the same. And if you drill down into the parks with a unique experience, which is where people like we looked at that data of people were looking for best RV resorts of, right? Like being more picky with their money in
Right.
2024.
Exactly. Yep.
I think if you drill down and cut out the cookie cutter, and I realize what that's saying, like I'm actually lumping cookie cutter into the people who spend $4 to $8 to $12 million on these resorts, right, or more. But they're cookie cutter if you don't do anything with experience. Like if you have a 45-foot long concrete pad and luxury patio furniture, and that can be cookie cutter too. So if you cut out those cookie cutter experiences, then that would make sense where if you're being more choosy, then the perception of finding the available sites at the places who you view as experiential could be harder, right?
Correct. Yep.
Interesting to think about it that way. Okay. The rise of mobile-driven spontaneity. I think that's not really new, but same-day bookings grew by 33% year over year, according to HipCamp data. Over 500,000 users are expected to make campsite bookings via their phones in 2025. The historical trend shows decreasing lead times, with booking windows dropping 50% from 79 to 39 days between 2015 and 2018. It's interesting. Stay duration, short getaways for extended experiences. Evidence of increased stay durations. Several indicators suggest campers are opting for longer stays. 54% of camping households intend to take longer camping trips in the coming year. That was cited from the Canadian Recreational Vehicle Association. Some campgrounds offer incentives specifically for extended stays, such as Callaway Park's 7-night free. Weather insurance adoption is expected to double in 2025. That's interesting. And that makes sense, though, right? Because if you're looking at someone who's only taking the one family vacation, they want it to be perfect. So maybe you're willing to shell out for that weather insurance to make sure you're not accidentally in a rainy weekend. That makes sense to you, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. It also, speaks to the idea that people may not take the long trip this year if they can't get to the places they want to go, like again within the national parks, and have that same experience.
50% of camping households intend to take more frequent camping trips, but that would probably lend it toward, this must have done more in Canada just because I was in Canada on Perplexity. But maybe the data isn't there in the US. I don't know. But the more frequent camping trips, but I bet those are more local, right?
Yeah, we were seeing early on that the trend was toward the longer trip.
Families represent the fastest growing segment in glamping, with bookings increasing 50% faster than non-family glamping trips. Property type affects booking windows. Apartments, 42 days. Houses, 55 days. Villas, 88 days. That's interesting. It must have been glamping, Airbnb, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Generational differences impact tech usage. First-time campers continuing the market, with 5.8 million Americans making their camping debut in 2024. Seasonal variations, economic, any of this other stuff interest you, or camping type breakdown? Long-term RV rentals, 1 to 6 months, serve as a temporary housing solutions. Short-term appeal to weekend travelers exploring destinations. RV parks in cities often lack appeal compared to hotels, while the opposite is true for natural settings. That makes sense to me.
Yep.
Price comparisons suggest long-term RV stays are approximately half the cost of extended hotel stays. That's interesting. I wonder if that's a missed opportunity, though. But maybe not, like, because you have to then bring your own RV, right?
You do, and there's the trade-off. A lot of folks are looking into the long-term stay idea, and that's one of the benefits is they do offer pretty good discounts.
So optimizing for the 2025 booking landscape, implementing dynamic pricing strategies. Campground operators can leverage data-driven pricing to maximize revenue, adjust rates based on occupancy thresholds, e.g. 50 to 59% equals plus 5%, 60 to 69 equals plus 7%, etc. Implement booking window-based pricing, e.g. plus 10% for bookings 90 days ahead, minus 10% for 0 to 3 day bookings. That's an interesting strategy. Nobody would normally think about discounting is why I say that, right?
Right.
But maybe like if your site is not full by that time, that kind of makes sense to do a negative percentage for the short-term people, especially the budget-conscious people who are locals. That's actually fascinating. I'm going to expand on that maybe after our show.
Yeah.
For our clients.
That's interesting.
Apply different pricing rules, different site types based on demand patterns, balancing reservation systems, conclusion. Okay, so that's Perplexity. Let's see what Grok says. Key points. Research suggests campers book campsites 2 to 4 months in advance, favoring early planning over last-minute bookings. Again, right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems likely that campers prefer longer stays, though specific data on stay durations is limited. The evidence leans towards seasonality and economic factors, like a 23% price increase in 2024, influencing booking patterns, with millennials driving social media-based decisions. And unexpected detail is the rise of buy now, pay later options used in 17% of bookings. That's another thing, right? Like Klarna and Affirm and those places, if you can offer those through your booking engine, I don't think any of the major booking engines allow that right now. Do they?
I don't think so.
But that's interesting because like you could, not that I'm saying you should replace your booking engine at all with a Stripe or something that just doesn't make any sense. But those platforms do allow that easy integration with the buy now, pay later. And it would be interesting. Like there are some, I think I was talking to somebody who uses Firefly and they use Stripe as their payment processor.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be interesting to see if they could just flip a switch on because Stripe does integrate with that stuff really easily to do buy now, pay later. That might be, honestly, that might be a selling point of Firefly. There you go, Firefly, if you're watching. If you could do that. All right, let's just skip all this stuff. We'll just look at, I think there's a key takeaway chart. So average booking lead time, 2 to 4 months before camp begins. Camp price increase, 23% from 2024 versus 2023. Does that make sense? Maybe. People were raising rates quite a bit.
Yeah. That was, yes. And we heard that. We heard it.
BNPL usage. What is that? Oh, Boondock. What is BNPL? Usage in bookings? Buy now, pay later. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Usage in bookings, 17% of 10.9 million bookings. 80% of millennials using social media for advice. This leads also to your like the mindset of like I'm hearing what's happening with inflation and things are making me nervous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trust in user-generated content versus brand content, 47% versus 25%. So maybe that's influencers. Campers seeing camping as stress relief, 94%. And a desire for simpler times impacting 2025 plans. I feel like that was just pulled from CampSpot's report, which I'm not saying isn't accurate. It's obviously very well-researched data, but I wonder, I don't know. I question that, whether that's, like there is that nostalgia there, but how much is that being sought out in a reservation at a campground is where I'm not sure of. What do you think?
At the point of sale, probably not. It's the guest creates that themselves, typically. Like they seek to create the experience the way they had it when they were younger, maybe, or in a different family situation. So That's a little bit more self-directed.
Okay. Seasonality influences booking windows. Okay. All right. What do we want to do next? Or I don't think we need to do any like market research on that, do we?
No, I think we're okay.
All right. So what do we got? We have we already did kind of inflation anxiety. We have economic outlook and discretionary spend. Examine how overall economic stability or instability shapes discretionary travel spending among campers in 2025. Does that interest you or no? Keep going.
Yeah, it does, because I think it relates to a lot of the topics we've already discussed.
All right, so let's try running this. So we'll go into Grok, and we will start to run these, and then I'll give you the details about them so they can start running. Run that, and then we'll go to Perplexity. We'll run that. Okay. So our question is, or our objective is to examine how overall economic stability or instability shapes discretionary travel spending among campers in 2025. Our key questions are campers more cautious or do they still prioritize outdoor escapes even in uncertain times? Which macroeconomic indicators, e.g. GDP growth, job market, and interest rates most influence travel budgets? Does a recession or downturn drive more local shorter trips versus bucket list adventures? How do campers differentiate between necessities and luxuries on a camping trip? And what strategies can campgrounds employ to remain appealing regardless of economic shifts? Expected deliverables are analysis correlating discretionary spending with economic markers, segment breakdown, family versus solo travelers versus retirees, and best practices for recession proofing a campground business. You ready to hear this?
Let's hear it.
All right, we got Grok first. Lisa, if you want to share this, you can, just so people can read along because we're not going to cover most of it. Key points are research suggests campers prioritize outdoor escapes in 2025 with 93% planning to spend the same or more despite economic uncertainty. Again, I think this has changed already, right?
I think so.
But tell us why you think so. Because nobody should listen to me about data, right?
Yeah. Because people do change their habits when things are uncertain. There's and again, we talked about this before, like what is a spike, what's that level? But when you have talk of entering a recession, which is new, the talk of the recession that didn't enter the dialogue until a couple weeks ago. So that word alone will create change. So people change their habits, even if they don't change their trip exactly. They may change the amount they spend. They're going to change how much they spend on food and entertainment, and other types of things. They're going to cook at their campsites. They're going to look for other ways to decrease their spending. So they're at least going to make that kind of adjustment. So, I don't think that, however, I will say that spending the same or more can, and here's an intervening factor, that if the person thinks costs are going to go up, they are going to expect to pay more if they're going to do the exact same thing.
It's interesting when you say that. Like, you and I have both talked to a lot of campgrounds who say January and February bookings were up over 2024.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, how much of that do you think is related to the expectation, as we saw in the consumer confidence report, that inflation, what did they expect? It was going to go up 6% or something this year, even though the data doesn't show that. But that's what the expectation of the consumer was? Or was it 4? I can't remember.
I don't remember the amount.
Anyway, whatever. But I wonder how much of that do you think is I want to book before potentially my campgrounds raise prices on me?
I would say that there's if a person knows they're going to take the trip, if they're fairly locked in, they absolutely will do that.
Or there's a friendly cancellation policy because there's not a lot of non-refundable lock me in like there is in the hotel world and campgrounds, right?
Right.
So then that maybe could lend itself to like we might be looking at more cancellations. If prices, well, if you lock in your lower price, then no, you're likely to stay with it. But if you lock in your lower price and inflation continues to rise and impacts gas prices and intangibles that you can't prepay for in advance, then that could lead to higher cancellations out of that bucket, right?
Correct.
So, but then that also bears the question, is this reflective of what we can expect in the spring and summer, or is it creating a false sense of security? Because the people are booking earlier, potentially, some people, not all, some people, let's just call it 20, 30% of that bucket. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
Are booking in advance to secure potentially like to avoid the dynamic pricing or to avoid the potential of the campground to react to the whatever's happening in the economy and raise their rates. So if those people are shifting, if those people are normally spring summer bookers, 20 to 30%, and they're shifting their behavior earlier, there's not likely to be a 20 to 30% replacement for those people in spring, at which point you might start to see spring and early summer bookings go down by 20 to 30%, but you already have those bookings. Does that make sense? See where I'm kind of going with that or no?
Yeah. So,
I mean, you got to expand on that, man. I'm tossing it to you.
yeah.
I'm just a philosopher. I don't have the answer.
I think that those early bookers are again, they're people who pretty much know what they want to do. They know where they want to stay. They want to get the site they want. So they're going to get in early regardless.
Right. And those are the people who have been booking in advance, though.
Correct.
Which is the 70%, let's call it.
And the other folks who were thinking that this year might be the year of the big trip may have started to book early, but then we've seen some changes. So they're either going to cancel or push their trip further out. So, or they'll take a different type of trip. So the impact, will it be earlier or later? I think when it's all said and done, if how we evaluate the year won't be in the next 3 or 4 months, it'll be in the latter part. It'll be August, September, October.
Yeah, I think there's a third bucket though that is in that group of early bookers. It's the people who want to avoid the inflation, right? And so we don't know yet. Again, to your point, we won't know that until August or September how that all plays out, right? But that is an important piece of the early bookers because I think why it's so important is because if even 10% of the people who would have booked their trip anyway in spring or summer following their normal booking patterns that is a shortened booking window over the last few years, all that kind of stuff. So if they were going to book anyway, but have shifted their booking behavior to try to account for inflation earlier in the year now, that's a chunk of 10%, 20%, 30% of bookings that you would normally expect to happen in spring or early summer that now you already have. And so by thinking that it's a good sign that January and February is up, it's not actually a good sign because those are the people that you already would have had anyway. They're just booking at a different time.
I think the percentage is smaller.
I'm saying, but even if it's 10%.
Yeah, it could be around 10% because in general, people want to book their trip for the time of year they want to go, that they typically go. They don't.
Yeah,
like
I'm not saying change their dates. I'm just change so they may still be booking for July, but in January.
Right. Okay. I got you.
Yeah.
I would say probably 10% is probably a decent guess. I do feel that a lot of people are going to take a wait and see approach. We've seen that in the past, and it helped boost off-season numbers, shoulder season figures, where people went a little bit later. For example, 2023 was one of the busiest Octobers nationally that we've had, even though the year
talking about
itself
winter
was
camping
down.
and all that. I remember us talking about winter camping is all I was saying during the 23. I think we had conversation about that.
Yep, there was a decent amount of that happened.
But the wait and see people, right? Again, I think it's important to understand, and you can obviously tell me if I'm wrong, but the way I look at this is the wait and see people are also the people who would have already planned to book, right? And so it's just a shifting of the booking. It's not an addition or subtraction to the booking for a percentage of those people, not 100%
Right.
of them. And so I think there's a danger in saying like, this is looking good or this is looking bad because we're too early.
There is, and one of the things that happens too is the group who delays their booking, the longer they delay to actually book a trip, it decreases the likelihood that they actually go.
Yeah.
Because it increases the likelihood that something intervenes and they change their plans.
Okay. What else do we got here? Do we want to keep going on this thing, Lisa? So we only got through one research point and then we had a good conversation. So this is interesting. I don't know if does this prove we don't need AI? Or we just need AI to prompt us?
We need the prompts. We absolutely need the prompts.
Yeah, we're not creative enough to create them on our own, but we can discuss them. GDP growth and consumer spending seem to influence camping budgets with a high correlation to travel expenditure. So that's interesting. So these are economic numbers that it's talking about. I don't think we have a GDP number yet because the first quarter is not even done yet. Do we have a GDP number for the end of 2024 yet?
I haven't seen it, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened.
Okay. But we do have consumer spending. Retail spending came in lower than expected, right? It was at 0.2%. Was that the latest retail spending number I saw from the market?
I just saw that GDP grew by 2.8% in
the end of 2024?
Yep.
Okay. Which, how much of GDP is related to cost? Because if inflation's up 2.8% and GDP's up 2.8%, doesn't that mean that actually it was flat?
I don't know enough about it to say anything intelligent.
I got to Google that or ChatGPT that in a second. But we do have data on the retail sales is 0.2%, which I think was lower than expected.
Mm-hmm.
I think they expected 0.6%. But I don't know where that, what does that mean with consumer spending, right?
Right.
It seems to me like that because we asked the question about the data up there, right? So it seems to me like this would be a spending number that we would get in a report. All right. It seems likely that recessions drive more local, shorter trips. Campers likely differentiate necessities, gear, and facilities from luxuries, glamping, and Wi-Fi, balancing cost and comfort. Campgrounds can remain appealing by emphasizing affordability and targeting younger demographics like millennials and Gen Z. Again, different marketing messaging though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take all your old retiree pictures off the millennial Gen Z page. This is still something I remember from the Jellystone days. I had, I think it's a KOA now, but it was a Jellystone Park at the time in Lawrence, Kansas that was owned by Ralph and Kim Newell. And we were doing their website back then, I think, and we were talking about switching out, in the fall when the kids go back to school, switching out all the pictures for older retirees because no older retirees want to be around a bunch of screaming kids. And they're not there, right? They're not there if they're back in school.
Right.
So that's the way, Jellystone, I think, is it true that Jellystone has always traditionally had a hard time capturing they're way busier in the summer when the kids are out of school, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So that was a way to play on that stuff. Campers' priorities in uncertain times. So we talked about that. Economic stability. Let's see if there's a chart at the end. Families prefer group sites, family activities, and cost-effective options. High demand for national parks, playgrounds, and pet-friendly sites. So that's interesting. Like, again, if you're combining from a family perspective, this is where campgrounds have a leg up, right? Is if
Yep.
you're looking at like, I can only take one trip, well, why not go to a campground that also has a playground and also has a place for my dog and also, right? But you've got to market that way. You've got to tell your story that way. Solo travelers seek flexibility, adventure, often younger, increasing RV rentals and tech-friendly amenities. That's interesting. Retirees prioritize comfort, longer stays, and more leisure time, likely to benefit from senior discounts and extended stays. That's kind of the same behavior, right?
Yep.
I think we briefly talked about that. Okay. I don't know what this is. Detailed analysis, summarizes key camping statistics. Okay, that's fine. All right, and let's look at perplexity briefly. Economic stability, consumer perception. In 2024, companies like Chill RV Rentals reported lighter reservations and shorter trips, indicating consumers are carefully managing their spending. Hey, that was Modern Campground too. That's a good site, guys. I've heard they
Nice.
do good work. Yeah. Planning horizons, economic uncertainty compresses planning horizons with more last-minute bookings. Economic pressures drive interest in camping locations closer to home. The shift toward camping during economic downturns means previously quiet spots become a bit more crowded, an important consideration for both campers seeking solitude and campground owners managing capacity. How do you think that impacts? I'm a local and I stay local anyways to do my camping because I work or go, right? But now, who the fuck are all these people who are in my quiet spot? Do I still go or do I cancel?
It's a good question. You might get some drop off from locals if that does happen.
Do you segment your park?
Yes.
How do you do that without big infrastructure investment, knowing that this is probably temporary? And by temporary, I'm defining less than 5 years.
Yeah, I think you. I mean, it's a logistical challenge, but where are your reservations coming from? How do you, and how, you do the best you can. I've actually spoken to some campground owners here that, for example, when one of the big companies here, a lot of shipbuilders were going to their campground because there were layoffs, and they were going there, and their campground normally catered to a kind of older, higher income group, and so they had to figure it out on the fly, how to segregate, how to put the shipbuilders in one section and everybody else in another, and keep them as far away as possible because it was creating way too much friction. So they did it based on where the reservation was coming from. They tried to figure out the volume. It wasn't easy. That's all I can say, is it wasn't easy. They seemed to manage it, but it definitely is a challenge. I don't know how, in the example you gave, if that is really enough to drive people away. They may not like it at once, but once they're there, I think they'll be fine.
1 to 5% of people, maybe a small number.
Yeah.
Especially because if they don't have a budget to go anywhere else, and all the other local campground, like, I don't know, I guess you could find the campground that's local that's doing a terrible job at their marketing. They're probably quiet. So they're still spending their money, just a different place.
Right.
This is interesting. A section here that's different. Strategies for campground resilience. So we want to give strategies to people and be actionable, right? Price structure adaptation. Flexible pricing models allow campgrounds to maintain occupancy while accommodating visitor budget constraints. Tiered options, creating multiple price points through varied amenities packages, allows visitors to self-select based on their economic capacity. Like, I think this is an interesting thing. I don't know how again, this is like the separating of types of people. This is not easy to implement, especially with staffing constraints. But creating an amenity light package, like, that's easy with activities, right? But it's harder with, like, you can't visit my playground because you don't have a wristband or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
That requires monitoring. When the robots are here, it'll be fine.
Right.
Let's have the robots with lasers, like, stay away from my playground. That's how they're going to sound, by the way. That's a scientific study.
All right.
So just
I
so you
believe
know,
it. I'm
heard
on
it here
board.
first.
I like it.
That's a dog needs to be up with me. Extended stay discounts, substantial discounts for longer stays, encourages visitors to extend trips while reducing per night administrative costs, off-peak incentives, amenity prioritization. Campground operators benefit from distinguishing between must-have and nice-to-have amenities. Essential infrastructure. Maintaining investment in basic infrastructure, water, electricity, and sanitation ensures foundational guest satisfaction, regardless of economic conditions. This is important, right? So many people have built up these amenities, and we talked about this a little bit on the Fireside Chat show earlier. Like, the basics have to be covered. Same thing as having a comfortable bed in your cabins, right? Before you add the nice-to-haves.
Exactly.
But you're going to have to
The
cut
basics
back
are-
too. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I said it. I said what I wanted to say.
But like, you're going to have to cut back too as a campground owner. So you need to decide where I want to put my more limited money, and whether that's limited from lower reservations or whether that's limited from your insurance costs are up and your electricity costs are up and you have inflation that you're dealing with too. Whatever that is, you've got to choose. Scalable activities. Develop low-cost activity options that can be scaled up or down based on demand and economic conditions. Provides operational flexibility. Necessities versus upgrades. Clearly distinguishing between necessary maintenance and optional upgrades allows for strategic deferral during economic contractions. Marketing emphasis on value framing, emphasizing comparative value, e.g. camping at 47% lower cost than traditional travel, rather than absolute price points, resonates during economic pressure. That's fair. Proximity marketing. And it's interesting. I wonder if the psychology of the 47%, that would be interesting to do a study on at some point, because he used to say the psychology was 49%, 99%, right?
Mhm.
It's better to sell something for $199 than $200. People are probably oversaturated by that now. So I wonder if a 47% type number sticks out more. It would be fun to study that psychology. Proximity marketing, highlighting accessibility to regional markets, can capture increased interest in close-to-home recreation options. Experience focus, shifting marketing from amenities to experiences and memories, acknowledges the emotional value visitors seek during economic stress. That's fair. I think there's a danger, though. I talked to a campground owner about this, and I ask everybody now, especially with this changing situation, like I say, what is your story? What is your reason for people coming? Because it's no longer enough to have your miniature golf course or your pool.
Right.
That's something that sets you apart, right? And so many of them have said, like, well, family memories. Well, like, people can create family memories anywhere, right? What makes your family memories special? But also, like, there is an argument to be made here that the memories are important to people, but I don't think memories is enough. It has to be memories plus something.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But telling the story, but clearly saying the memories is still important, but you have to have and something else.
Correct. Absolutely.
Operational efficiency, KOA's CFO, where's that at? Modern Campground again. KOA's CFO advises campgrounds to properly manage staffing levels while expecting payroll costs to rise. Insider Perks CEO advises campgrounds to use AI and cut your payroll costs because the new is in and the old is out, and whatever that out with the old, in with the new. Like, don't let your payroll costs rise. Why? Okay, sorry. So energy management, with utilities projected to increase 5 to 35% depending on region, implementing energy efficiency measures becomes increasingly crucial. Technology integration, adopting technology that reduces operational costs, online reservation systems, automated check-in, without diminishing guest experience, can preserve margins. That's the key, without diminishing the guest experience.
Correct. Exactly.
That's the key. And just by default, assuming that something like a robot diminishes the guest experience is the wrong approach. It can, for sure, if it's not done right.
Correct. Yeah,
but not having the conversation because you assume it is the wrong place to finish before you even began. So, okay. So we got that. I think we have time for one more real quick. So let's skim through this, and you have to pick the best one here, Scott. We have emerging frugal luxury mindset. Forget them.
Mm,
Technology influence on planning. Maybe that's a different show.
yeah.
Eco-conscious travel. There's not enough of those people that are relevant to our current discussion.
How about glamping versus traditional camping?
Well, let's look through them all. Let's make sure that that's the best one because we only have one shot here.
All right.
We have multi-generational trips, high-tech versus off-grid, campsite upgrades and add-ons, inflation-proof marketing messages. We could probably talk about that in a separate episode. Social media influence and reviews, local market versus tourist seasonality. That was examine how campground operators can attract and retain local guests versus national or international tourists. Health and safety perceptions. Nobody cares about health anymore. COVID's over. What are you thinking, guy? Generation Z and millennial preferences. Work from camp trends. Group versus solo travel. Value-added amenities, which we talked about, I think, briefly the other day. We had one of those contrarian opinions. And emerging payment models. So you're sticking with your answer?
It's either that or group versus solo.
Versus glamping versus traditional camping?
Yeah, one of those two.
Let's do group versus solo then, because I think that's something we haven't talked too much about. Like obviously we haven't talked about either today, but we talk more, I feel like, about glamping versus traditional camping as a topical thing than we do other places. Would you agree with that? Or Okay. All right. So let's say we'll do this and then we'll start it and then I'll read the questions and we'll cover that. So we'll start that. And then new thread here. And we'll do that. All right. So then we have the objective is understanding shifting trends in group bookings, friends, weddings, and reunions versus the rise of solo adventurers. The key questions are group camping events, weddings, corporate retreats increasing post-pandemic? Do solo campers represent a growing niche? Is it niche or niche? Should we cover that?
You can say it either way.
Okay. It's not dichotomy.
You see, you got it. You got it.
Essential solo female travelers, especially solo female travelers or digital nomads. What amenities or site layouts cater best to large groups versus solitary guests? How do marketing tactics differ for group versus solo segments? And are safety or community-oriented features, e.g. group activities, vital for certain traveler types? Expected deliverables are quantitative data on group size trends, wedding or event bookings, qualitative insights on why solo travelers choose certain sites, and recommendations to balance communal spaces and private experiences. So that's our thing. Let's look at Grok. Okay, key points. Research suggests group camping events like weddings and corporate retreats have likely increased post-pandemic, driven by a surge in camping popularity, though exact data is limited. I think that's older data by now. It seems likely that solo camping, especially among women and digital nomads, is a growing niche, with 28% rise in solo campers from 21 to 22. Again, older data, but that's okay.
We're actually seeing that continue to increase. At least the interest in solo camping is increasing, so continues to. So it's a real thing.
How do you think the willingness to do solo camping is impacted by all the factors, right? The type of place you're going, the cost you're paying for it, the environment of the place, like a lot, right?
Absolutely. It's a lot. It's all those factors, but a lot of the people who solo travel, they just want to be self-determined in their plans and where they go and what they do.
Yeah, because why do I want to run it by someone who would choose something different than me?
We see that real popular among Gen Zers who like to solo travel, but then they still like to meet up with their friends while they're there when they're at their destination. but they don't want to stay with them. They don't want to travel with them.
I don't want to divert this topic too much, but here's an interesting question because I like to spit these out of my mind, right? Solo travelers don't like to travel for the reasons that you just said with other people, which I agree with. But in the future, and when I say future, I mean less than 5 years, it's very feasible that solo travelers would travel with their humanoid robot companions because they can direct them to do whatever they want, right?
Yep.
Does that mean that campgrounds, obviously, would a campground then charge a second adult fee and make more money for the humanoid robot? And I mean, it's a fair question, right? Like they're not using amenities, but they're charging. So they're using electricity, right? Their wear and tear on the floors, right? I mean, this is not a hypothetical question anymore. This is for sure going to happen. People are going to travel with their robots that know them the best, right?
Right. But they
that's a different show. We're going to have to talk about that. All right. Campgrounds offer different amenities for groups, e.g. communal spaces, group activities, and solo campers, catering to their distinct needs. Marketing for groups focuses on social experiences, while solo campers are targeted with solitude and safety features. Safety and community features are vital, with solo travelers, particularly women, needing secure, well-lit areas, and groups benefiting from organized activities. So this is something to think about too. And I will admit, like, being a man, like I considered this, but I didn't really understand it until I talked to a few female friends who were solo, travelers, generally speaking, right?
Mhm.
And if you think about, like, there's a push and pull here, right, with campgrounds of like, I like well-lit spaces, generally speaking, for all people because security, right?
Right.
But also, like, well-lit spaces deter from the darkness of people sleeping, and I will get some complaints about that if there's too many lights. So then that push and pull plays into the solo female camper too, of like, if I'm tent camping as a solo female camper, as example, right? And there are other demographics that this impacts too. But if I need to get up and go to the washroom in the middle of the night, sorry, bathroom for you Americans, there's no bathtub in the bathroom. I'm sorry. So like it's a washroom. Anyway, or in Europe, it's a toilet, but it's not a bathroom. There's no bathtub, Scott. Can we debate this on another show?
And some bathrooms don't have wash facilities, so it's not really a washroom either. So it's a toilet.
God damn it, you're right. But there's more bathrooms with wash facilities than there are with like bathtubs in public places.
Public places, correct.
All right. So like what's that push and pull then of like the safety versus the need for like darkness and quiet?
You opt for safety. You err on that side.
Does it depend on the type of people that would travel to your property?
To a degree, yeah.
Opting for safety, but like the specific use case of walking to the washroom. Obviously, you don't have tent sites. That's less likely to happen.
Correct, and a park may want to consider their layout. We have dark areas, and we have well-lit areas. Maybe there are areas that cater to that solo traveler or the group of people who want a more well-lit area. So the park owner is really going to have to determine that on their own, and again, base it on who their guests are.
Now, I want to ask a question, because we need something controversial on the show always, right?
Yes.
If you are increasing lighting around your park at night in an effort to make it safer, does that mean you hate the military? Because the military would obviously come to your park and want to use night vision goggles to immerse themselves in the experience, and you would not allow them to do that because they would be blinded if there's too much safety lighting. I think this is a relevant question.
We're going to have to ask our military people to tell us the answer to that.
I want to know, though. I think it's important. Not now. Like, I think we should ask the military people. But, okay. That was my controversial thing for the minute. All right, so group versus solo camping, amenities, marketing tactics. Groups focus on. We won't have time to do this, but it would be interesting to run this through like what a solo group or camper would want to do. I think I would have liked to see this question tied to the economy too a little bit for our discussion, but
Yep. I agree.
focus on social aspects. Let's see if we can just edit that real quick. Can we edit this? Yeah. I want to tie all of the above to changing economic conditions in 2025, both likely or potential, and how solo or group campers would react, and how to reach them with marketing. Is that fair?
Yep.
All right, let's see if we can run that again. We'll have time to do perplexity, but I kind of like Grok's answers better. Well, I don't know if that's true because there's some different data in perplexity. We can look at this real quick and see. We don't care about post-pandemic. Female solo campers. Many are documenting their experiences on social media platforms, especially YouTube, creating visibility and community around this glowing segment. For travelers, car camping has become popular, so that's another thing. Sense of security, like you're safer in your car.
Yep,
than
that's
you are in a tent.
a big part of that. That's a real big part of it.
Why in God's name are you not letting car campers stay at your property?
That topic came up when I was in Michigan, by the way. I put it out there, and it was quite controversial.
Of course it is, but we're talking about it. It's on Outwired, right?
Yeah.
And nobody's saying you need to let a 1967 rusty piece of shit in your campground as a car camper. But if they want to stay in their nice $60,000 minivan, let them.
Right. Their biggest thing is, well, we don't want homeless people there. And it's just kind of like,
what homeless person is going to have a $60,000 minivan?
Right. And it's like, you have to use your own judgment. But, the bottom line is that you can't just blanket not allow car campers. By the way, most of the campground owners, if they have any kind of tent that comes out the back or anything, they allow them there. I know we're off topic a little bit, but a lot of them are starting to allow it. But there were a lot of people who were very, very against the car campers.
Yeah, I mean, that mindset is just going to have to shift.
It is.
I think it's the same thing as like the trailer park stereotype. Like up in Canada, and like we don't view trailer parks as the same way like you guys, generally speaking, view trailer parks. And I don't mean you, Scott, or campground owners. I just mean the way the word is connotated.
Oh, I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's see what we got here. We have a long report. Research suggests group camping events like weddings and reunions are increasingly post-pandemic. Seems likely that solo camping is growing. Evidence leans toward different amenities for groups and solo campers. Marketing tactics likely differ. Amenities and site layouts, marketing strategies. Economic impact, with 2025 economic forecasts predicting solid global growth. Again, old, but potential inflation risks from tariffs. Group campers may have more disposable income for camping trips, while solo travelers might prioritize affordability. I think it depends on the type of group here too, right? Like, are we talking about church groups? Are we talking about Boy Scouts? Are we talking about corporate retreats? Are we talking about weddings? Like weddings, you're typically going to spend more by default. You expect a wedding to be expensive, right?
Yep.
Corporate retreats might be willing to spend a little bit more. But I think it depends on the market. Well, I think we probably should have changed the rest of that thing, but we didn't get as much data as we wanted. But free camping by solo campers is 36% more likely in 2023. I like that's another thing too that we didn't even get a chance to touch on. Is like our audience on this show is mostly the private campground owners, right?
Yep.
But there is a lot of people who are going to go to Harvest Hosts. They're going to go to Hip Camp. They're going to go to BLM land. They're going to go to state parks. And depending on what happens with national parks, they might go there. Some of them certainly will. But they're more budget conscious. And like you have If this continues down a path where I think it's going to go into, I don't know if it's going to be a recession. Like they seem to change the definition of that word every 6 months now. I think we've entered a recession years ago, generally speaking, but like I think if it continues down this path, then there's going to have to be a mindset of change here, right? Of like, there's always been this push and pull against like, I hate harvest hosts, or I like harvest hosts because they bring more people into the lifestyle, or I recognize that people will blend travel, right? And they might do a harvest host and a private campground and a hotel. But like if it comes down to less trips and experiences, like a camping trip with less golf, mini golf and pools, but in the backyard of a winery is a much easier sell, right? So
Yeah.
like again, you have to, not saying that they are better than you, they're different than you, but they sure as heck have an easier time telling their story.
Absolutely. And it's a part of the mix. It's a
Yeah.
part, it's a part of that experience. We run into that all the time. People want those different experiences. They want those things. And that, again, is filling part of that void, for where people are looking for different things. So yeah, a harvest host experience is great.
But now if you go, but I'm saying if
great.
you go, sorry, continue. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was going to say, it doesn't replace the campground though. It doesn't.
Yet. But here's my thing. I'm not arguing and saying this will, but I'm saying some people will inevitably be pulled here. If you can go to a harvest host location and experience a winery or a brewery or whatever the heck, harvest hosts, all the different places, right?
Yep.
Agritourism, etc. And you can only take one vacation because you have less money. That's the point in time where I think it could potentially pull from private campgrounds. Temporarily.
It could. And they're experimenting with, hookups and stuff like that too. So it can, but they're typically limited to one night too. So anyway, it's part of the mix. And you know what? If you're a campground, you just got to understand they're there and it's part of the mix. And that's what people, are looking for, is different types of experiences like that.
And tell your story. Tell your story. Tell your story. Tell your
Tell your
story.
story. No, I agree. That is the one sentence that everyone should just keep repeating over and over and over. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts are, tell everybody, keep your eyes out, peeled on what's going on. Keep your ear to the ground, eyes peeled, whatever you want. Keep looking. We're gonna have some research coming out soon on some of this stuff, and we'll keep asking the questions. Stay in contact. We're going to keep monitoring it. I think, we'll keep looking at the reservations. And the other thing is I'd love to hear from people. Anyone who's listening, I'd love to hear from you because it'll be included in our research and our work. Please reach out and let us know.
Give them your cell phone number.
Pardon?
Give them your cell phone number.
Okay. Is it?
If you want to hear from them. Yeah.
You can go to my website, KarenConsultingGroup.com.
Yeah, use the contact form. That's good. That's not telling the story of how people want to modern communicate, Scott. I think that's all good advice though, right? Is to keep your eye on the pulse of all this stuff. And just you got to focus on telling your story. Like we said, like beat it into your head. Like you should already be in touch with whoever designs your website, whoever designs your marketing, whoever puts, even if that's the local person in your store. Or if you can't afford it and your budgets are cutting, then go to ChatGPT, go to one of these resources, go to Google, figure out how to do it. But you've got to do it. And that's it. So that's a pretty good show, right? Yeah, we did
Absolutely.
good.
No, it was good. These are good topics. It's like each one of them could be their own show, honestly. It's like we could, if people want to, we can do that, get into the weeds that much, but they'd probably be bored. But it's a great conversation. It's stuff that has to be considered. It's reflective. I think when you put everything together that we talked about today, it really tells you how things are changing. Things are changing, and it's right there in front of you. It's so again.
Yeah, don't stick your head in the sand. for the same reason that, like, it's the same conversation about AI and robotics as this is.
Yep.
Don't stick your head in the sand. If you stick your head in the sand, you're going to pull it up and you're going to be like, holy shit, there's nobody at my park. What's
Exactly.
happening? Or my expenses are out of control or whatever. So, all right, let's get out of here. We can keep talking forever.
All right.